2023 FDOT Design Manual, Update Training, FDM 201 Design Controls, presented by Dwayne Carver, AICP. FDM 201 Design Controls establishes the ground rules, if you will, for the design of a roadway. The design controls are sort of like givens that are identified at the outset of a project. And then these controls determine the remaining criteria that are used for the design. So they're pretty important. They set the initial conditions, if you will, under which the project is going to be designed. Some examples of design controls that you'll find in this chapter include things like the access management class, the context classification, the design vehicle, and also the design speed. The changes for 2023 are specifically related to the design speed control. Table 201.5.1 indicates the allowable design speeds on our FDOT roadways. These are based on the type of roadway that you have and the context classification. So you see limited access facilities are separated from arterials and collectors, and the arterials and collectors are differentiated by their context classification. Also, you'll notice that the arterials and collectors are further distinguished by whether or not they are a part of the SIS. And we're going to talk about the SIS in just a moment. But before I do, I want to mention a few things about this table in particular. When FDOT introduced the concept of context classification to our roadways and assigned design speeds to these context classifications, this was something that had never been done before. And so the department had to come up with a way to identify how we wanted things to be built in the future, but also respect the fact that we have many miles of roadway that have already been built and are already operating at a particular design speed, regardless of whether we're comfortable with that speed or whether we'd like to have that speed changed. They're there and they're not going to change overnight. They will take a long time and a lot of money over many years to change the character and the speed of these roadways. So this table has always been a little bit of a compromise, and recognizing that we had existing conditions that needed to be respected and changed over time as we could, but at the same time we always knew that we wanted to move the department and the state forward with the safest streets that we could get as we're doing new construction, and we want to try to design those so we have the right speed in the right place. So this table has changed a few times over the years, and this year we've changed it a little more. I'm going to talk about how that change was made, but recognize that this table has always been a little bit of a compromise, and when you look at the design speed ranges, you'll see that. And you'll also see part of the compromise was the inclusion of these SIS minimum speeds, because our roads have many parts that they have to play, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit next. So one of the parts that a lot of our roadways play is to be a part of the strategic intermodal system. If you look at this map of Florida that's on the slide here, and you can see these thick green arteries that run all through the state, those are roads that are serving a purpose as part of the strategic intermodal system in addition to any other purpose that they may serve. You'll notice that those roads run down to our airports, seaports, spaceports, all kinds of different freight and intermodal facilities that move people and goods across our state, through our state, and on into the rest of the United States. So this is a very important part of our transportation system. It's a key element of our economic development in Florida, and it certainly is something that we want to protect at all costs. And so this SIS is a function that many of our roads have to serve. Some roads are very well suited to serve this. Limited access facilities, for instance, are ideal for doing this kind of thing, but you'll notice that not all the roads on that map you may recognize are not all limited access facilities. And so there are places where these roads run on our arterial system, and that's recognized in the design speed table that we were just looking at, and we're going to look at again. And so over the years, the department has looked at different ways to try to reconcile these sometimes opposite needs to move the roads at high speed and high capacity, but also provide as much safety as possible. And we've been able to leverage the context classification system a lot of times to do that. And so I'm going to show you on the next slide then sort of the changes that have been made for 2023 that have tried to incorporate what we know about how our transportation system is being used by our different users, and also what we know about what we need to keep our freight and goods and people moving as part of the strategic intermodal system. So coming back to this table in the FDM, here are the changes that were made as a part of the 2023 update. So we removed the minimum SIS design speed for facilities that are in either a C5 or a C6 context classification. And if you want to know what the context classes are, if you're not familiar with those, you can go to www.flcompletestreets.com, and there's all kinds of information on there about context classification, and I'll have that URL again at the end of the presentation for you, so you don't have to write it down. But I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about the context class here, just to say that if you're in C5 or C6, those are our most urban conditions that we have in Florida. C5 is a town center, C6 is an urban core, and you can read more about those on that website if you'd like to. But essentially what we've done this year is recognize that in those conditions, really the minimum speed that you are showing for arterials and collectors is the minimum achievable speed that you could have even on the SIS. And so the SIS this year, we've just said, well, we're not even going to recognize a minimum speed on there. You do what the speed needs to be based on the arterial range in those conditions. And so that's a big change for this year. And again, it's allowing us to take the critical need that we have to move goods and services with the SIS, but also recognize that we have safety needs, we have community development needs, and other things that are going on our highways, and massage this table and try to get it closer to the table that we really think it needs to be for Florida. Another change that we made is that we further added some flexibility to it, and if you see at the bottom here, footnote 5 was added, which says that the SIS minimum design speed may be reduced to 30 miles an hour in the C2T, C3, and C4 context classification for facilities with a transit route. So this is further trying to massage and fine-tune this table and recognizing that even outside C5 and C6, even in the C3 suburban and C4 urban general, and sometimes even the rural town C2T context, we may have places where we still need lower speeds than what's shown in that SIS minimum speed. And so in those locations, if we have a transit route, that was the thing that they decided, well, if there's a transit route, then that may indicate that there's probably going to be pedestrian traffic there. And if that's the case, we want to make sure that that road operates as safely as it can. And we don't want that SIS minimum speed to be a barrier to that. And so we're going to allow that to go down to 30 miles an hour in those conditions, which is the speed at which you should be able to design, the safe street that you need using those conditions. So if you meet those context classifications and you have a transit route there, you can still go down to 30 miles there in those conditions. And there are already some existing footnotes as well that allow you to go down to 35 miles an hour in C2T if you have certain other conditions existing. Over and above that, we still have, which we've always had in place, a design speed variation that can be requested. And so if you have an SIS facility and you think the minimum speed is too high and it doesn't meet one of these other conditions that would let you have a lower speed, you can always request a design speed variation. And those do come through from time to time. They get looked at, and to my knowledge, those have always been accepted. And we've never had one of those turned down, and the folks at the SIS encourage us to submit those design speed variations where they're needed. Again, we are trying to respect the need and the direction from the legislature to provide freight traffic and goods, the movement of goods and services, but at the same time we have to respect the need of safety and community development in Florida, and so we are doing this in the best way we can to try to meet both of those needs. So in summary, for this year, we've modified Table 201.5.1, which is design speed. We have removed the SIS minimum design speed for roads that are in a C5 or a C6 context classification. We're now allowing the SIS design speed to be reduced to 30 in the C2T, C3, and C4 context classification if that roadway also has a transit route running on it. And as always, you can still request a design speed variation if you need a different speed than what is shown for the SIS minimum speed based on other conditions. And so you're encouraged to submit those if you need that on your project. And as promised, here is the URL for the Complete Streets Guide. If you need to find more information about context classification, you can go to flcompletestreets.com. And there are several resources on there that will help you understand context classification, including our context classification guide, but also some animations and simulations to help you see how the context classification system works. And if you have any questions about that, there are links on there as well. And here is my contact information if you have any questions about this presentation.